So as we usually do, the first thing we're going to do is just review the agenda to make sure that if someone has a comment on something not on the agenda, it's not on the agenda. So the agenda consists of basically two items: finalizing and approving for public hearing our village residential neighborhood zoning districts that we've been working on. We'd like to set a hearing date today and to review what remains to be done for those districts. And our second item is to continue our discussion of Buttermilk. I would like to leave about 15 minutes at the end for some updates and new business that we should just briefly touch on. Anybody have any comments about the agenda? Want to add anything, change anything? Mark?
Hey there, just following up to make sure that that 15 minutes is going to be related to the select board special meeting we had last night. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, obviously it's not going to be the full discussion of what that subject is, but it's going to introduce the topic and get us to where we want to be talking about when we're going to have a fuller discussion. So we've got to get some things off our plate. We have a lot of things on our plate. So we would like to move along so that we can have that fuller discussion.
Okay.
All right.
We can talk about it all then.
Yeah, we can talk about it in the last 15 minutes. We'll set up when we're going to talk about it. Okay, not hearing any other comments. Mark, you can remind me at 8:45 that we need those 15 minutes. All right, so any public comment on non-agenda items? Looks like we have a couple of visitors from the public. I'm not seeing any hands or seeing that anyone wants to make a comment on a non-agenda item. So we will move on to reviewing the minutes of our May 1st meeting. Are there any additions, corrections? Anybody want to say anything about the minutes of the May 1st meeting? Okay, not seeing any hands, not hearing any comments. We will accept those minutes as written into the record. Okay. So we'll move on to our first real agenda item to finalize and approve the village residential neighborhood zoning districts to go to our public hearing in the process. Camels. Okay. And I outlined that in a document that says the amendment packet, which is this document here. This just tells everyone what's in the packet. We're just going to go through these things. There's been lots of opportunity for people to look at these, develop any questions, last minute revisions you might want to incorporate. And we're going to start with, you all should have this piece of paper somewhere or on your computer so that we can refer to it. The individual documents are on the website. They all have numbers, so we'll go in the order that they're numbered on the web page. So the first thing we're going to look at is the map that was made by CCRP-C4S. You have not seen an exact map so far, so maybe, Keith, we could just have a brief view of the the map.
Give me 1 second if I could find it. There it is.
Okay, so what we're looking at here is the village residential neighborhoods north. And in our text, we've been referring to it as neighborhoods with an S because some of these neighborhoods aren't contiguous with each other, but they're in the same district. So on the map, we would like to get the Regional Planning Commission to correct it the legend to read Village Residential Neighborhoods North and South. So I'm hoping nobody objects to that. That's what's been in the text. They just didn't put that on the map. So it's the yellow areas here. You can see the Tilden Baker area, the Lemroy Court Pleasant Street, Church Street, Esplanade. So that's in the Village Neighborhoods North. In the Village Neighborhoods South, we have Thompson Road. That's this kind of pink brick or whatever we call that design, some kind of little round things.
Mhm.
Thompson Road, Cochrane Road part, Lower Bridge Street, Old Brooklyn Court. It's the extent pretty much of the water and sewer district. Keith, if you could move the map a little bit to the left, because yes. So over here, where you can see CO0488, that's the cemetery, and CO0405 is Nature Conservancy property, just like the piece above it. So in some earlier versions, we had them in the Village Neighborhood South because they are in the water and sewer district. However, it doesn't make sense to put them in that district because one is a cemetery and the other one is a piece of conserved land whose partner piece is not included in the district. So that's the only new thing really that we did with this map. Anybody have any questions about that? Church Street, just to point out that all those little tiny boxes on Church Street, the condos at the end of Church Street, they are not in this district because they're actually in the Ag Res district. They're carved out of farmland that is Jericho Settlers, that CS 0092. So they're going to stay with that lot, which is what they are, where they are situated. So any questions at all about the map or what it includes? It does include the Jericho Road portion up to the schools that the select board had us take out of the RC district. So we are now taking it out of the HDR district, like a lot of this other light pink neighborhoods district. We're taking it out of the HDR, making it its own district. Okay. So you have had this in the packet. You've been able to examine it for a few days. So, all right. Any questions at all about that? Comments? Gary.
So I was curious why it crossed the interstate, because this is a district that relies on having water and sewer. And
It doesn't cross the interstate.
what about BX 0170, BX 0244?
That's HDR.
That's the, those are the,
No,
where
you're
the
right.
white spots are, that's the HDR. Yep. It's only the little portion.
Right, I got it. My mistake.
Yep. Okay. Sounds
Sorry
good.
about that.
All right. No problem. All right. So not hearing any comments about the map. It's what we've been talking about all this time. We'll move on to the text of the two new districts. They have new numbers because they're new districts being carved out of the old districts. Neighborhoods North is coming out of HDR, Neighborhoods South is coming out of Ag Res. So it's 311 and 312 are the numbers. There's no red line because there was no previous district there. They're brand new districts. Okay, so that's the text of these two districts. Does anyone have anything they'd like to say about the text? We've talked about it all before a number of times. Any questions or concerns or last minute alterations?
Thompson Road, Cochrane Road. Green space.
Oh, the silence is deafening.
And, you know, just recall, we've kept these residential. This has been the wish of the residents of these neighborhoods, is that they stay as residential neighborhoods
Yes. Mhm.
with their close-knit houses. And we have had to make smaller lot sizes because of Act 47, open it up to 3 and 4 unit buildings because of Act 47. But in general, it's a residential area. Both of these are residential areas. Okay, so I'm not seeing any hands. I'm not hearing any comments about the text of these two new districts. So we're going to move on to the next item, which is 5D, the elder care facilities and related definitions section. So a reminder about the point of this was the residents in these neighborhoods wished them to remain neighborhoody, but they would like to allow for some healthcare and elder care facilities. So we made this definition of elder care facility, which is a subgroup of supported housing. And it will go by the attorney. We assume he won't have any problems with it, but we'll have to wait and see. Group home, we had to alter slightly to bring it up to date. It is in our definitions already. Recovery residence is in the state statute, so we're putting that into our ordinance so that people know what that is. And the group home and the recovery residence are by state permitted, where you have residences up to 8 people. So there's nothing we can do about that. Over 8 people, we're not allowing them in these districts. Okay, any comments, questions about that?
Looks good.
Thanks. Okay, so we will move on to number 5E, which is the on-ground improvements. And the point of this is to clarify when driveways and parking areas are to be considered. Are they to be considered in setbacks or not? Are they to be considered in lot coverage or not? There has been ambiguity in our regulations as to how that works. And so we have introduced this term on-ground improvements so that we can add that into certain definitions and not into other definitions. Our zoning regulation currently considers a structure, and this is a common definition in many ordinances, it's not just ours, as an assembly of materials for occupancy of use, which allows almost anything to be considered. You know, if you throw some gravel on the ground, you could consider that an assembly of materials for a use. So the point of this was to separate out the on-ground improvements. That's everything that's made on the ground. This may come in, this is for the whole document, by the way, because it's in the definitions section. The same as the elder care. Those are in the definition section. They relate to the whole document. But we might as well clean these things up as we need to for the current work. This is going to come into play when people talk about, you know, is a parking area, is that considered a structure? Should it be allowed in, let's say, the floodplain, or should it not? You know, if it's considered a structure, then it has to be with all those other kinds of structures. So that's the point of that, just in case. I mean, I'm sort of beating this horse excessively,
Yeah.
but yeah. So anyone have any questions or comments about that? We took out the trails part, which people felt we hadn't discussed enough, and that's
Mhm.
reasonable. I think we will need to put in a definition of trails. That would be helpful for everybody. What are trails? Are there natural trails? And then are there man-made trails? You know, but we took it out of this because it's not necessary for these particular neighborhoods to have that be any more, you know, any more explained than what it already is, which is not explained. At some point, we will need to work on a definition of trails. The ag-res obviously is the place where we're going to find most of those. So any questions about that?
I had a question. This is Kathleen Gent, and my question is, so this on-ground improvement really means at the ground level?
Yes.
Okay.
It's on the ground. Well, I suppose you could say a building is on the ground. So it's at ground level. So maybe we would like to say it is at ground level.
Possibly, yeah.
Says it's on the ground.
It says it's on the ground, but so is a building on the ground. You know, a building is on the ground. It goes up from there, but so I don't know that it makes a lot of difference, but we could think about that. Keith, what do you think?
No, I think it's fine the way it's written.
Okay.
I think if we're going to administer it, we understand what the ground is.
Okay. It's on the ground. And the examples that we give, a driveway, a parking
Right.
area, a sidewalk, a walkway, or a patio, those are things that are clearly flat on the ground.
Yeah,
So-
and I would add, you know, sans that explanation, I would agree with Kathleen that you'd want to explain what the heck we're talking about, but I think we do.
Okay. Okay, Chris.
So just returning to our discussion from last time about impervious surfaces, is the way it's worded now, if I want to build a house on a lot, can I build a larger house if I have a gravel driveway than if I have a paved driveway, because the gravel driveway is not impervious?
No, gravel driveway is considered impervious.
Really?
Yes.
But it's not a surface from which precipitation runs off rather than permeates into the ground.
Well, it's still
Yes.
well, I mean, not
It
necessarily.
is.
I mean, over time, gravel surfaces break down and spall and compact.
Yeah. Yeah. So in the way our zoning is administered, gravel surfaces are impervious surfaces. And we're also still considering, in regards to your last month, the last meeting's point about the low impact development kind of thing, where you have a patio, but the stones actually allow for some permeability of water between them. We decided that that was too much for us to deal with right at the moment. It's going to have to be rolled into the stormwater work that we do. And what usually happens, according to Keith tells me, is that some percentage is assigned of permeability. So that's beyond our scope right at this point. So we're just going to leave patios, driveways, gravel as being impervious surfaces for the moment.
Okay, can we just add gravel then to make it explicit? Because am I missing where it says that gravel is impervious?
It's in the regulations, in the definition of a driveway, I believe.
Okay.
I'd have to dig that
Well,
out, though.
it says on-ground improvement, a man-made impervious surface. So here is under impervious surface at the bottom, the surface from which precipitation runs off, including but not limited to a paved or unpaved road, driveway, sidewalk, walkway, parking area. So
Covers it, but having unpaved there, yeah.
I think unpaved captures that adequately. An unpaved road is going to have something on it. Presumably, it's not just dirt, although I suppose it could just be dirt. But if it's a road, it's compacted.
Yeah, I wouldn't get too caught up in the minutia on that.
Do you want to say a paved or gravel road? Would that help?
I just wouldn't want somebody to get caught up in this one way or the other. My initial read as I saw the sentence about which precipitation runs off rather than permeates into the ground. But I don't know. I mean I don't feel strongly about it, but I'm just wanted to see if we can make it as clear as possible what types of driveways are covered by impervious surface.
Well, I would be fine for putting gravel in there in that list. I mean, are there other things that people put on roads and driveways that aren't gravel or pavement that make them impervious? I don't really know. It does say including but not limited to.
Yeah.
We could say a paved or unpaved, such as gravel, road, driveway, sidewalk, etc. I'm okay with that.
That sounds good to me.
It's an
Okay.
easy fix.
Yep. All right, we will add that in as an amendment to this group. Okay. Then the next piece is, so any more questions about that one?
No.
Those definitions apply to the whole package, and we hope that it clarifies some other areas that are a little ambiguous. Okay, so the next piece of this packet is the residential density section. So, and this is educational primarily because we have now introduced into multiple districts the concept of residential density that we didn't really have before, except in Jolena Court and the village downtown, which are of recent origin. So the residential density section clarifies these questions that we have had about residential density and ADUs and duplexes and what a group home counts as in terms of density. All of those questions, what residential density is, what it means. So section 6.14 is explanatory about residential density. Somebody had a question or a comment.
Joy.
I was just gonna mention that I think we skipped the multifamily housing. We went right from on-ground to the residential density.
Yep, I'm saving that for the end because it's got a low, it's got a low number.
All right.
As you see, it's later on, it's 5F. So we're
Oh,
on.
all right. I was looking at the agenda and then the documents and the packet, the way they were all organized, and I thought maybe you went over it. Sorry.
Actually,
and then I
it's
lowered my hand because I was just gonna let you go.
No, we probably should have gone to that, but
yeah, F does come before G. I realize that now, even though it's listed later, but we'll get to it. Don't worry. No concerns.
Okay.
So, okay. So any questions about the residential density explanatory section? And we hope that people will go to this section to get their questions answered when they have a question about density. And you know, obviously we will keep up with any kind of statutory changes
Residential
that
density is not extended
might in the,
to single-family dwellings.
all
It's
right,
too-
somebody's reading it out loud, but that's
That's
okay.
me. Sorry.
Hi, Allison. Do you have
Yeah,
a question?
I'll turn myself on mute here. I'm just trying to just carefully look
Yes.
at the thing.
And what we have added in the first paragraph, 6.14.1, that might not have been in the earlier versions, is the terms base residential density and residential density bonuses. Because even though in this district, these two districts that we're doing right now, we are not offering residential density bonuses. However, this section is a standalone section that will apply to the whole document. And in some other districts, such as Buttermilk, for instance, or maybe some other districts, we may put in a statement that says, in this district, residential density bonus is allowed up to a certain maximum density. So we just added that in so that when we need it in the future, it will be there. And what we have done in the text of these two districts is change the word residential density to base residential density. And henceforth, going forward in our districts, we should put a base residential density, whether or not we allow bonus units. If we don't allow them, that's fine. It's still the base residential density. So that's the thinking there. In this district, only base residential density. We don't offer any residential density bonuses. So, and they're, you know, they're going to come into play when there are larger projects, and there aren't any permitted, except for a PUD, in these districts. Yes, Allison, you do have a question.
I have a question about this definition of the elder care facility. Residential use shall be, oh, now my screen's moving all over the place.
Yep.
It
E,
was
number
one,
E.
okay, so one dwelling unit for each 8 residents. Where does the number 8 come from? I'm
It
just
comes
curious.
from the group home definition.
Okay. I was
So
just curious about that.
it's just adapted from the group home.
Uh-huh. Okay. All right.
Which is statutorily defined.
Oh,
Yeah, that
okay,
is-
fine. I've never seen that, I guess. Okay. I was just curious. Now, you know, I can see that you put a lot of work and effort into this and that you've tried to think of so many of the comments that you've gotten from people and concerns and whatnot. And I certainly compliment you for the efforts of trying to come up with something that works and that people will accept and that's reasonable. It's a difficult task. So,
Well, and that accords to the statutes.
right.
That's a big part of it, is that, for instance,
Yeah.
in a duplex, each unit counts as one unit. So a duplex, the density is 2 units in a duplex.
Yeah.
But with a single family residence and an ADU, that's only counted as 1 unit. We have gone around the block with the ACCD people who have worked on Act 47 about that. And that is what they say, that in order to make it exciting for people to put an ADU, it doesn't count towards the density. So for instance, if you are maxed out with your density with your single family home, you can still put an ADU, even though you're maxed out with your density. So that's a statutory thing. And you don't have to allow an ADU for duplexes, for instance. The only thing you have to allow it for is a single family home.
Oh,
And emergency shelters and so on, they're not subject to density requirements. So that's statutory as well.
now this is for the district that's in the village area, right? This is
No,
not
this is for all districts.
for all districts. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
So that whole group of sections that has the number 6 in front of it, those are all generally applying to the whole regulation, the whole zoning regulation. All the, like the flood hazard overlay is in 6, parking and loading is in 6. These, the number 6 group, which we keep making bigger and adding to, applies
Yeah.
to the whole document.
Okay.
But we have, we have some of these items, like a group home, in our village neighborhoods. So it does apply to the village neighborhoods, and that's why we thought this was a good time to clear up these things. And ADUs, they apply into the village neighborhoods. Duplexes are in the village neighborhoods. So, all of these terms, many of them are in the village neighborhoods, as well as all the other districts.
Are these also in the other districts?
Duplexes, ADUs are in other districts, duplexes are in other districts,
Yeah. All right.
group
these
homes
things-
are in other districts. So, yeah. And the questions have come up more and more lately because we have introduced this concept of residential density, which
Yeah.
we weren't really using before Jolena Court. Before you have apartment buildings, when you just have single family homes, when your zoning is just all about single family homes, you don't really need much of a residential density question.
Mm-hmm.
So this introduces it. Now, one thing I will say is that the state would like to encourage you to get rid of density maximums. So they didn't come right out in Act 47 and say you can't have a maximum density. They came out and said you have to have at least 5 units per acre. And so we put that in as a maximum density because it was more than we had up until now. But the people who wrote and worked on Act 47 would like to get rid of that density altogether so that you could have as dense as you wanted. We're not quite ready for that, we thought.
Well, I don't think so. But what now? I'm just a little confused. Is this just in the village area, or is this all over town?
This is all over town.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Thank you. That clarifies that for me.
This applies to every district.
Hmm.
Okay.
Well, it's a matter of concern that there are many people who are looking for places to live.
Yeah. Well,
It-
that's the
yeah.
balancing act,
Yeah.
is
Yeah. And
that's
and
why Act 47 happened, because
mhm. Yeah.
the towns weren't really stepping up and say, you can put more buildings here. So they weren't stepping up to say that. So they encouraged you by requiring that you make minimum lot sizes smaller and that you allow more density. And they suggested you get rid of density altogether, but we didn't go there.
I think that's good that you didn't go there. No, I think you
Yeah.
put a lot of work into this. All of you put a lot of work into this. I can see that. And it's a challenging task.
Yeah, and partly challenging because we haven't really had this before in our zoning.
No.
We haven't.
We haven't. And I know one of my concerns has been the storms that we've had. I mean, I certainly had my own property got really chowdered on one of these storms, but other people did too, especially up in the near Huntington area. Charlotte Moultrip's house that the entire roof blew off from, and the locals fixed it. But you know, we've had some real challenges up here, and all over town too. I feel a concern for Cochrane Road because I think that's perhaps easily flooded. And that didn't used to be the case.
Yep. Yeah, so, you know, there are competing challenges.
Yes. No,
We need
there
to consider
are.
stormwater, and that's something that we have on our list to consider. How are we going to
Yes.
handle all the excess water? So we'll get to that, and we're just
Yeah.
sloping up on the density question by
Sure.
doing what's required in these two
Yeah.
districts.
One job at a time. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Kind of get that. Well, yes. Well,
All right.
yeah, onward and forward here. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So any other comments about this section, the residential density section? And we'll certainly going to have to go over this with the DRB to make sure that they're on board with all of these things, that they understand these things that are statutorily required. So we will do that. It's on our list.
Do you think that statutory requirement is going to alter with the next coming legislatures? There's a lot of talk about the number of people, say in my age group, that are retiring for the legislature, and a whole different group of people coming in, and they're also, you know, there they are right smack in Montpelier, where the whole flooded business very nearly ruined the state office buildings and whatnot. I mean, I just wonder if that's going to come about as a big issue over there. I don't know if you have any
Right.
feedback.
Well, the flooding may, but in terms of density and housing, I don't think it's going to be weakened. I think it's only going to get stronger
Yeah.
because of the housing crisis. So, you know, they're going to have to work around the flooding and the stormwater questions. They're going to have to work with those. But in terms of housing and density, I don't think those are going to get less. So,
No. Well, I have a long history of that. Dean Davis, who was the governor that really basically kind of created Act 46. I mean, that was like a half century ago, and he lived right across the road from me. And so I know what he had in mind was to save the state from the kind of destruction that was happening where the rivers overflowing, particularly in the southern part of the state. There was a problem with that. But now we have kind of a whole different set of things, and basically, Virginia, I'm in favor of what you folks have done here and created here, and I support, you know, the basic concept of it, and also your extremely diligent efforts in trying to come up with something here. I support all of that. I just have, my only real concern is about the floods and what has happened. I know what happened to my house and what happened up here, and just especially along Cochrane Road. That's all.
Yep. Well, we certainly aren't going to forget about that anytime soon. Chris?
Just a quick question. Are we going to be considering revised section 6.15 tonight too? I just want to make
6.15 is the density bonus section. Is that 6.15? Yeah, we may be talking about that if we get to it with Buttermilk. Yep.
Oh, okay, but we didn't get a written draft version of that revised from 2 meetings ago, did we? Or did we?
Well, it would be the same one as last time, I guess, if it's not in here.
Right, because we did talk about changes in the last meeting, but
well, you know, we will talk about that when we get to Buttermilk.
Okay.
Because it's not necessary here. Because we're not offering any residential density bonuses in the VR, and so, but we will talk about at least whether we're going to talk about it in the Buttermilk section, okay? Okay, so then we have parking and loading. So Act 47 required that we have the one parking space required maximum. So we had to make this change with the paragraph in red added to 6.1.2, which basically just says that in districts served by water and sewer, the residential parking requirement is one parking space per dwelling unit. In other districts, consult the table below. So this was the simplest way of not having to rewrite that whole part of the table with dwellings in the water and sewer, dwellings out of the water and sewer, multifamily dwellings in the water and sewer, multifamily dwellings out of the water and sewer. So that was the point there. Joy?
Okay, so and according to our definitions, one dwelling unit could be a duplex?
Nope, a duplex is 2 dwelling units.
Okay, what did we say that a duplex, what's the term that we said that it would? I'd have to go back to that document. Okay, I mean, that makes sense to me, but I felt like we just said the opposite in the
Well, a
definition.
single family home with an ADU is 1 dwelling unit.
Okay,
So that doesn't mean that you can't put more spaces. That is all you can require.
I got that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And with multifamily, obviously, each one of the units is 1 dwelling unit, and each one can be required to have 1 parking space. But a 2-bedroom in a multifamily cannot be required, as is currently existing, cannot be required to have 2 parking spaces. Now, the developer can put 2 parking spaces if they feel that the need is warranted, but the town cannot require more than 1. Does that make sense? Joy, your hand is still up. Is it the same hand or it's different hand?
Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. Yep, very good. So are there any questions about that? And that's one of the Act 47 changes. This is going to apply to all the districts, but it does apply to the neighborhoods as well.
I found what I was talking about. Can I just go circle
Yeah.
back to that?
Yeah.
So in residential density,
Yeah.
each dwelling unit in a duplex or multifamily dwelling. Oh, each unit. Okay, I thought it was saying that the duplex counts as 1 dwelling unit, but it's saying each dwelling unit. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Each dwelling
Never mind.
unit in a duplex. So, okay. Yep. Good.
All right, thanks.
All right. Any other questions about the parking business? Okay. I'm taking that as that you're all good with that. We'll move on to the last one, which is 5F in this packet, which is the multifamily housing development standards, section 6.13. And the reason that we're working on this now is we wouldn't have had to work on this section right now if we hadn't been required by Act 47 to have 3 and 4 unit multifamilies be a permitted use in these 2 districts, as they are in any district that has residential uses and has water and sewer. So because of that, they will have 3 and 4 unit buildings. So in our zoning, something that we put in last summer with the RC districts, was the multifamily housing development standards in order to make the neighbors of multifamily development standards who might not want this to be allowed, but it is now required by Act 47, in order to make them comfortable with having 3 and 4 unit buildings and feeling like they were going to be an asset to the community and not some kind of detrimental thing. So that's why we put in the multifamily housing development standards. The reason that we're changing them somewhat is because of real world experience with them, with Tyler's having to permit things under this, with comments that others have made. So we're working with this section with each new district that has to deal with it to try to make it a better product. So a couple of changes from the last time you looked at this document, and they are in blue. The front doors question. So in our zoning, the front setback and the front yard refer to the side of the building that faces a road, public or private. So if you have a corner lot, it will have 2 front yards and 2 front facades and 2 front setbacks. If there's a private road or a public road that goes around it on 3 sides, it will have 3 front facades. It doesn't matter what you call the front door. It doesn't matter. It only matters that this is the side that faces the road. So in this case, it seemed possibly to be excessive that if you had 3 front setbacks, that you would have to have 3 doors, 1 on each one of those, that met this provision. Now, the point of the provision is to make the front of the building have a welcoming human face so that people walking by do not feel like it's just a giant wall. I don't know if any of you have walked on Dorset Street, but there are some apartment buildings there where it's just a long wall. There are no entrances at all. It gives you a fortress kind of feel. So the point was to have an entrance that gave it that human face, that human scale. But we took out the part that said that you would have to have that on every front facade. So you only have to have it on one facade, any one of the ones that are front. Okay,
Yeah.
so you can mull on that for a minute, and I'll talk about the other things that were changed. If you go down further on, this document is the same as the last time we looked at it. If you scroll down a bit, okay, 6.13.6 used to say that parking areas shall be screened with privacy fencing or vegetation as needed. Well, of course, the DRB hates the term as needed, to prevent light trespass from vehicle headlights onto adjoining properties. So there were a couple of problems with this. One is that you might not need privacy fencing and vegetation if your buildings are arranged in such a way that they come between you and the neighbors. Secondly, vehicle headlights is not the only problem with light trespass. The main problem with Buttermilk's parking area has been the lights that are in the parking area. So they all have to be required to be downcast and at a low level and all that kind of thing to prevent light trespass on neighboring properties. So light trespass is a big problem if there are lots of cars coming and going all the time with a multifamily house. So in this case, it says it still prohibits light trespass on neighboring properties, but you don't have to necessarily have fencing or vegetative screening because your lot layout and your buildings may take care of the problem so that you don't have to have those things. So that's the change there. Joy.
Okay, so this is only has to do with adjoining properties, not within one property. So if you have
It-
several buildings on a lot and you choose to do it all on one lot, this doesn't apply.
Right, it's adjoining properties.
Okay.
It's the neighbors of this project. So if you want to make a project, you know, with several buildings, for instance, and the lights are impacting those buildings, then that is not a concern of the zoning. The zoning concern is that it doesn't affect adjoining properties, neighbors.
All right, great. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Okay. So, ugh.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. So we left the privacy section in because we felt it was good for conversation starters. The DRB and Tyler are still going to hate it because it, you know, it's not precisely exactly what evidence you need. It is something they're going to have to use their common sense about. And I don't think we can get rid of everything that the DRB is going to want to be exact. In this case, you can show your building design to protect the privacy of the neighbors again. So this is the adjoining properties question. You're trying to prevent your neighbors from opposing your project because you've put a building with a window right across, 10 feet away from their window. So we're hoping that it allows for neighbors to come and talk about that and for developers to provide any kind of thing they want that shows that they've thought about it. Joy.
Sorry. So I had one more question about 6.13.6. What happens
Okay,
with
yep.
commercial buildings where they're at night, there are not people living there, and somebody gets all caught up and they can't figure out where to put the parking, and the zoning administrator has to tell them they can't have the headlights go into this commercial building. I mean, it really doesn't matter at night, right? In certain instances. Do we want to think about that in this verbiage?
Well, I suppose we could put adjoining residential properties.
I
What do
think
you
that's
think about-
worth it, but
What do you think about that, Keith?
That's fine.
Okay, we can do that. I take your point. Okay. All right, so that's amendment number 2 that we have made to this to our package. Number 1 was that other thing that we did. Okay. So everybody's okay with that, adjoining residential properties?
Yeah.
If it's a commercial property? I mean, what about a commercial, like if you make a multifamily rental building, is that a commercial property?
that's residential to me. There's residences in it.
Right. I know a mobile home park, for instance, is a commercial use. It's considered a commercial use, even though it's full of residences. Let's see, onto adjoining properties where there are
housing?
residences, where there are
Yeah,
residences. Okay. Instead of residential property, in case that is confusing, put adjoining properties where there are residences. Is that okay, Keith?
Oh, that's fantastic.
Oh, good. Thanks for that. Okay. Any more comments about that? Or point 7? Okay, so scrolling down, we talked about the outdoor living space, 20% of a lot. So right now, there's a bigger lot coverage of vegetated surface in all the districts that we have, maybe except for the IC. I'm not sure exactly, but in these 2 districts anyway, the neighborhoods you can have only 50% lot coverage. So you're automatically going to have 20% of the lot with some kind of outdoor vegetated space.
Yeah.
So this is only going to come into play when we start in the future allowing more lot coverage. And once we can't do that until we get our stormwater business fixed up and worked out how we're going to deal with stormwater, except by letting it sink into the ground, at some point, we may be required to have more lot coverage. Act 47 didn't require us to have more. It just required us to allow small lots of 0.2 acres. So 50% of that is not very much. We're barely able to get, what we need on that lot. But so 20% of the lot shouldn't be a problem for most situations right now. In the future, it's going to come into play. People may elect to have small patios for their units, for their buildings, and not have a bigger residential outdoor living space, a common living space. So any kind of open space counts here. If you have a woodland or if you have a wetland, any of that counts as common outdoor living space. Any question about that?
No.
Okay. The other change in the bulk storage area. So we've changed it to 50 square feet because a lot of storage units, like self-storage, is in multiples of 5. They're like 5 by 5 boxes, 5 by 10 boxes, 10 by 10 boxes. So that seemed reasonable to go to 50 square feet. It's still, you can put a bicycle, you can put skis. If it's 5 by 10, you can, it's a small amount of storage for the stuff that most of us have. But anyway, it is it's related to the way self-storage buildings often use their numbers. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about that. Last time we did add that cold climate heat pumps were exempt from the mechanicals requirement, but we added that last time. So that's just because you can't tell where you need to put them necessarily. It might be on the front and they don't all have to be screened. And if we're ever going to make the electric transition, we're going to need to make it easy for people. So Mark, then Chris. Mark first.
Oh yeah, sorry about that. Speaker buttons. Yeah, I was just thinking about that 50-foot storage location requirement.
Yeah.
Does that work now for like Buttermilk? And I say this not because I'm trying to drag Buttermilk into every conversation, but I'm just wondering, they're going to have a lot of units. Are they going to field that? I don't know how. I think it's a great idea. It's a nice feature, but going through the ranks of rental properties of my youth, I didn't have a lot of apartments that had that extra storage space other than a parking spot.
Well, so currently Buttermilk has these units in the basement of building 1. And they have not told us that this is a problem for them. So, I mean, to me, if you're going to have a multifamily building, you have to have storage for outdoor things, because otherwise they're all going to end up outside on the front lawn.
Because it to be clear, we haven't had that stipulation in our zoning before, right? That required
Nope.
storage facilities for multi-unit.
Nope. Well, we haven't had anything that would required anything for multi-unit buildings. So this is kind of a new thing. And, personally, I feel it's pretty important that you provide people a storage space for their outdoor things.
Mm.
So, I mean, you know, we'll hear from Buttermilk if they find it to be a problem. So,
I managed to get by without it. I don't know if it's a mandated thing, but I guess it's not the worst thing. 50 feet is not a very big space.
no,
So, okay. All right. For everybody else is really good with it, I am.
okay. Chris,
Just about the mechanicals and utilities section was, I don't recall that our intent was to exempt just a subset of heat pumps. A cold climate heat pump is a particular type of heat pump, at least as defined for incentives and programs. Were we? I don't remember that we wanted to just exempt that kind of heat pump.
oh, okay.
I prefer
I'm
to say
fine with
something like,
whatever wordage you think works. I mean, aren't all the heat pumps in this climate cold climate heat pumps?
you'd think, but actually, for example, I have a heat pump on my house that the installer and Efficiency Vermont say is a normal heat pump, not a cold climate heat pump. And it's because it doesn't go down, it doesn't create heat at as low a temperature as a cold climate heat pump would, but it was still appropriate for the application in Richmond. So I would prefer just to say the outdoor components of heat pumps.
Okay, and so is, all right. That's fine. Whatever you think is the correct thing to say there.
I think that'll clean that up and doesn't get us into subdividing this
Okay.
kind of appliance into.
So the outdoor component of heat pumps.
Yeah, I would say outdoor components as a C. I mean,
Components.
it usually will be a single, block, but it could be more than one.
Okay. Anybody have a problem with that? Yeah, I mean, you have more expertise in this area, so I'm counting on that being what we need.
I think that'll do it.
Okay. Joy.
I am just thinking about the storage part, and I wanted to make the comment that I think it's great, but I just want to say that the developer, the builder, whoever it is going to pass that cost on to the units. So it's only going to make everything more expensive. But I kind of agree with Mark on that one, but that's a consideration.
Yeah, well, many of these things were a compromise with the affordable housing people that we talked to, like Miranda Lascazi, who used to be on the housing committee. And, you know, she said that many of these things are going to raise the costs. Having outdoor living space is going to raise the cost. There's plenty of parks in Richmond.
Well, the outdoor living one doesn't, because we have to have so much lot. We only get so much lot coverage, so I feel like
you
that
only
one's
get
kind
so
of
much lot
easy.
coverage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Anyway, she thought most of them raised the costs, but this was a compromise that we made to introduce the concept of multifamily buildings into places that had never had them before. You know, I mean,
right. But the goal is for affordable housing, and 50 square foot storage unit goes for $125 a month. So, I mean, that's the cost that we're adding to rent by doing that.
yeah, well, I mean, that's the compromise with not having that stuff all out on the front lawn.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay.
I mean, we want more affordable housing, but we also want to keep the surroundings, you know, we don't want to turn people against multifamily housing, by the
Mhm.
fact that we're not providing at least minimal kind of amenities like storage. So,
All right. I just wanted
yeah,
to bring it up. We're always talking
Yep.
about how to make things affordable, and this is not one of
Yep.
them.
right. Yep. hmm Anybody else want to weigh in on that question? I mean, landscaping also. If you have to have landscaping, it's going to make the cost go up. If you don't require any landscaping, the developer may not put any landscaping. And then you're going to have, you know, people the next time around weighing in saying, well, look at that. So anyway, it's a compromise. But I'll take anybody else's opinions if they want to weigh in. Okay, so not seeing any hands, not hearing anything, going down to waste storage, EV charging, parking spaces. Any comments there with those items? Okay, so not seeing any hands, not hearing any comments. I would like to set the date for a public hearing. Joy.
I'm sorry, but I thought we were going to get back to front doors. I was waiting for you to circle back around.
Okay, front doors. Yep.
I had some
Go for it.
questions on this. So buildings with front setbacks. So that means when the zoning administrator is looking at the entire piece of property and looks at certain buildings, he's going to say, this one has a front setback, but these others don't. Is that if there's more than
Yep.
one building on a lot?
Yeah, if the building has no facade that directly faces a public or private road, then there's no front setback on that building.
Okay.
Is that
And
correct, Keith?
then-
Or you want to, let's let
It's still
Keith weigh
a
in on that.
well, there's still a front setback, but I mean, Joy's specifically talking about PUDs. So I mean, the whole idea is to, have a compact design. But I guess Joy, I'm not quite following the question here. Are we talking about PUDs? Are we talking about single
Yeah, I
family
guess you're right.
lots?
It is a PUD. Sorry, I
Yeah.
wasn't more clear on that. So,
Yeah,
and then
and
it says build, go ahead. Why don't you finish?
yeah, and no, I'm sorry to cut you off, Joy, but
It's fine. No, it's good.
The DRB does have the ability to waive those also. If you present a good argument for that, but with a PUD, it's compact design is what it's all about.
Right. So help walk me through this. Buildings with front setbacks. So there would only be one building on a lot that would be considered to have the front setback, correct?
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
I mean,
All right.
I mean,
couldn't
it
there
could be
be
a
two
corner lot.
buildings? Or what about if there were two buildings right next to each other, lined up in a row, each
You're right.
facing the
You're
road?
right.
So that would be
You're
two
right.
buildings with front setbacks. It would
Sure.
only be the
Okay,
building
and-
that's behind the other building that didn't have the front setback.
And we're
Right.
talking principal structures here.
Well, if they're all the same size,
Yeah.
right? So buildings with front setbacks. So imagine our property in the gateway that is on Route 2 and Willis Farm Road.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry to get specific, but this does, and if you guys want me to recuse myself, I'm fine with that. But
No, not at all.
so buildings with front setbacks shall have at least one entrance door on the facade that directly faces the front yard. So what would be our front yard? Willis Farm Road or Route 2?
You have
Yes.
two front yards,
Okay.
the one
all
that
right.
faces
So-
Route 2 and the one that faces
Okay.
Willis Farm Road.
All right. And then basically you're at a point in here, you're saying that you don't have to do all of them, right? If each unit
Right.
has a separate door. Okay, this is where I
Well-
get confused. If each unit, so this is each unit inside the multifamily building has a separate door on the front facade, then each door must be sheltered and defined, okay? If there are multiple front facades, so that's the situation where it's Willis Farm Road and Route 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
You
An
could,
entrance door on one facade will be adequate to satisfy this provision. So what does that mean?
That
That
means
means-
that if you have a building that has a front setback from Route 2 and a front setback from Willis Farm Road, right? So we consider that a corner lot. So you you don't need to put the defined front entrance on both of those. You only need to put
Right.
it on one or the other.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it meant that. Oh, it doesn't matter. Okay.
And the thing about if each unit has a separate door on the front facade, if you have a building that has 3 units and they all want to have an entrance,
Right.
then those have to be defined, but that you don't have to have an entrance for all of them on one. It's only if you choose to make an entrance. So if you, even if you want to put a back door facing
That's-
Route
yeah.
2, you still have to use these architectural features. You have to have a little overhang or something.
So no matter where a door is, you still have to do this.
Nope, only if it faces a
Oh,
front
okay.
yard.
Okay. I mean, to be clear, we're going to put something over a door no matter what, because it's kind of
Yeah.
makes sense. But
Right.
I just want to understand what the regulation is. So
Yeah.
it's only, you only have to do this sort of upgrade on one side that faces a front and not on any others
Of the one building.
of the one building. And then it carries on to the next one if it has a front setback. But if it's set behind that building, then it essentially does not.
Yeah, so I mean, it's directly facing such that it's visible
Mm-hmm.
from the public or private road. If you read the end of that first sentence, so it says is visible from the public or private road. So if you
Okay.
have a building that's directly behind another building, the zoning administrator might consider that a front setback, but there's a building in the way.
Okay.
It is not visible from the public or private road.
What about driveway? I don't see that word in here anywhere. So it's only Willis Farm Road and Route 2, not the driveway of these buildings.
Right,
Correct.
exactly.
And the parking lot.
The driveway and the
kinda
parking
doesn't-
lot is irrelevant. Yeah.
So in one scenario that we've done for our property, there is no entrance on either of Willis Farm Road or Route 2. So we're going to be forced to put some kind of door with a facade on it to face one of these ways. Because the
Unless your
doors, because you have the
DRB
parking
waives it.
in the back, and you have the parking, we have to put the parking at the back, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way it works out on our property. So we're still gonna have to put a door facing
Or
one
the
of those
side.
roads. Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
And you can put a nice front porch like in the Beverly Willis house.
Facing Route
Nice.
2 that
A nice
no one
front porch
uses.
facing Route 2.
Okay. All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep. Okay, any other comments about that? I think we should, if there are multiple front facades on a single building, do we need to put that in, Keith? If there are multiple front facades?
Honestly, I think you're overthinking it. I mean, keep it simple. To
Okay.
me, this reads pretty clear.
Okay. All right, well, you guys are gonna be the ones to, work on it except for the DRB, so hopefully it's clear enough.
Yeah,
All
most of these are permitted uses too, so this would be something that an administrator would be handling.
Mhm.
So obviously, if it's part of a PUD, that's a different story. You can move things around. You have that ability to move things around. That's the beauty of a PUD, in my mind, at least.
Well, certainly in these districts, only 3 to 4 unit buildings would be
Right.
handled by the administrator,
Mhm.
not,
Well, regardless, if it's a PUD, the administrator can't do that. It would be kicked to the
Right.
DRB.
mhm.
So.
All right, so are we ready to, we're gonna have to move on here in a minute. Are we ready to make a motion to approve these documents for a public hearing with the three small amendments that we have noted. The date that we would be considering, given the requirements for notifications and all of that, and creating the full red line document of the zoning, the whole zoning regulation, would be June 19th, 2024. That would probably be the soonest that we could have this public hearing. And we will take comments from that, and then there are still opportunities to change it after that, unless we approve it at the public hearing, which we haven't ever done really before. But so
I'd like to move that we hold a public hearing on these two districts, and with the caveats that have been brought up tonight, and
Okay.
move it forward.
Great. The two districts and the associated
Yes.
definitions and concepts. Okay. Okay. Is there a second? And would you like to move for the public hearing to be on the 19th of June?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, that's what I thought I said that. I apologize if I omitted that.
Okay. Is there a second?
Wow.
Well, I'll second it.
All right. Seconded by Allison. Okay. All right. So I will have a roll call, I guess, and to make sure that we capture all the votes correctly. So I'm going to do it in the order of this screen that I'm looking at. So, is there any further discussion about it? Okay. Keith, can we have the people all up instead of the document
We can.
so we can see everybody? Okay, so I'm gonna, if there's no further discussion, you could state your name and your vote, starting with Mark.
Mark Fossil, aye.
Okay. Allison,
Aye.
Ian,
Ian Bender, aye.
okay. Joy,
Aye.
and me. I vote aye also.
Yeah, Chris.
Oh, Chris, where is Chris? I don't see him.
He was
Oh, hi,
there,
Chris.
and then
Sorry, I skipped over you. Chris,
Chris Granda, aye.
thank you. Okay. The first name is adequate, but anyway. All right. So the ayes have it, and we will set up a public hearing for the 19th of June. And, in the meantime, if anybody else develops these other comments or thoughts about it, that's fine, because that's the point of the public hearing, is to take the public's input as well. And we will make these few small 3 changes and send the documents out again when they're changed. All right, great. Well, I think that's good. I think we do need to move on because whatever. So we're going to start on, we won't have too much time to do this right now, but we're going to start on the buttermilk question. And so the first thing that we kind of have to clear up before we actually get on with working on buttermilk is the fact that the select board put out a letter, and I'm going to get Chris to talk about this because he was involved in it, that committed the planning commission to discussing the things that we're already discussing. It implied that we would have these discussions. It gave the planning commission without any notice. The majority of planning commissioners knew nothing about this, but anyway, the charges were a change in the zoning to relax or remove the requirement regarding the commercial units, a change in the zoning to allow increased density, consideration of aiding Buttermilk LLC to meet the rental revolving loan funds requirements, and consideration of the above areas by appropriate committees of Richmond town government. So apart from the fact that this doesn't seem like either the select board majority or the planning commission majority knew anything about it, this letter was written, so we are now committed to these things. So I don't know, Chris, do you want to take like 5 minutes and talk about this letter?
Sure. I don't think it's going to take that long.
Okay, fine.
So the developer Buttermilk wished to submit an application to the Vermont Housing Finance Association for funding or access to financing under the Residential Revolving Loan Fund, which is a program that with a deadline for application submissions at the end of last month.
Well, the first round, by the way, that's the first round. That's not the end of the program. But anyway,
Well,
sorry to interrupt.
my understanding is that all of the currently available funding is going to be allocated then, but it's certainly the VHFA's desire to continue to do this. It's been fairly popular as a program, and it was the VHFA that encouraged Buttermilk and the select board to get the application in now, rather than despite the very short amount of lead time, in order that the VHFA would be able to say to the legislature, look how popular this is, please provide more funding in the future. Anyway, that's inside baseball. But that was my understanding of the sense of urgency, behind wanting to do it as quickly as they did, despite it having been available for a couple months before then. My understanding is that what the select board has done is said that they will support and are willing to discuss the things that we're already discussing. And I think the select board was careful to make sure that they committed the town, the select board, and the planning commission to no specific outcomes, but simply to discuss these areas. And that was enough for the VHFA. And my understanding is that they normally have a iterative process where they go back to the applicant, ask for additional information, so forth and so on. So if it goes to the next stage, there may be more required, but there's not now. I just want to speak to the last bullet here, is that these applications do require support from major employers in towns who testify to the need for employee housing. And in Richmond, the town is a larger employer, and so the select boards indicated that Josh would be willing to fill out, I believe it's a 3-page survey about town employee housing needs. That was the only other thing.
Yeah, and one other thing that hasn't been mentioned is that this letter didn't actually meet any of what Josie considered to be the requirements for applying, one of which is that the town has to kick in up to $500,000. It has to be 5% of the building costs. So this is going to obviously be discussed by the select board. My feeling was, let's wait and get the ducks in a row before they actually put in the application, but be that as it may. Anyway, we do not have to worry about the fact that one of the requirements is 5% of the building costs be provided, but we have been committed to both making these zoning changes, including the increased density, as well as providing a timeline for when the zoning changes were going to be done. So that is what we have been committed to, and I just wanted everybody to understand that that's what has happened at this point in time. So, any questions? Lisa?
Yes, Virginia, thank you. Am I unmuted?
You are unmuted, yes.
As far as I'm aware, and I'm on the select board, we have not discussed this. We have not taken any action. We haven't made any motions or anything about it. It really hasn't even been presented officially. So technically it doesn't exist. So whatever plans are being made are purely hypothetical, I guess, or, you know, without any basis in fact.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that's the reality. So it's not up to me. That's the way it is. So
yep. Chris, do you know when the final application is due? Josie has talked about a final application being due. Do you know when that is due? This clearly didn't meet the criteria of what you needed for an application. It was just like a placeholder for an application. But does anybody know what the time frame is for?
Well, like I said, what I understood to be the case is that they needed to get something in by the deadline, and then it's an iterative process with discussions with the VHFA. I've never been through this myself. I can't tell you how that goes, but that was what I heard.
Mm-hmm. And do you know what all the requirements are for the application besides the fact that the town, which would be the select board, agrees to kick in 5% of the building costs, and that the zoning is increased to some amount? We don't know what. I guess it gives you points the more the zoning is increased to. But there are many things that doesn't seem like we quite understand about it. Ian?
Well,
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to say, I think those would be excellent questions to ask the select board when we have that meeting that we were talking about of where we get direction from them about where they want to go on Julian Port. And I suggest we just add those questions to the agenda for that meeting.
Mm-hmm. Ian?
Did Buttermilk ask the town to do this?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Oh, they did. Okay. So it wasn't
But-
like just some random application process got started without
Well-
the developer being involved.
The developer approached Chris and Bard to do this.
Oh,
So it wasn't like they came to a select board meeting and said, would you support this project? This is one of the problems that I have with it.
oh, okay.
And Buttermilk laid out a list of things that they needed the town to agree to. One of them was to agree to increasing the zoning, to agree to kicking in 5% in some way of the cost of the construction of the building, and some other things, none of which, luckily, the select board agreed to. They just agreed that we would discuss it, which doesn't really seem like it met Buttermilk's needs, but they wanted apparently to have this placeholder in there with just an affirmation that we would discuss it. And to me, since we were already discussing it, that's sort of the only thing that made it okay, since the majority of the planning commission knew nothing about it. The only thing that made it okay was we were already on this track of talking about it. So I guess we can go on talking about it. And, you know, if I were a select board person and knew that one of the requirements was going to be 5% of the building cost, I would have kind of been reluctant to go along with it. But anyway, that's not our problem. We just have to agree that we're going to talk about increasing the density, which we're going to do, and we're going to have to talk about making some kind of a timeline at some point in time. And today, in the middle of the day, a letter from another communication from Josie came to me and Chris and Keith, which she shouldn't just be communicating with us. She needs to be communicating with the commission,
Yeah.
stating that, you know, it was her takes on the current draft that we're looking at, the increased density that we're looking at, you know, it's kind of inadequate from her point of view. And, you know, obviously she is one of the stakeholders that has to be on board with whatever we decide, along with the select board and the public, those three groups of stakeholders. So, you know, and she reiterated again that the town had agreed that we would set up a timeline for the zoning changes without consulting us whether we could do that or not. But, you know, presumably we can set up a timeline of sorts for the zoning changes, and stating that her, you know, probably everybody hasn't had a chance to read this letter. It's this JC zoning and rental revolving loan fund inputs. She submitted it in the middle of the day today. Nobody's really probably had a chance to read it.
Yeah, it's a bear
She's
to
talking
open.
about, yeah, she's talking about by September, you know, the zoning has to be in place by September, the zoning changes. So you back up a certain amount of time for the select board hearing, you back up a certain amount of time for the planning commission hearing. You know, we're already in July. And, you know, I don't know that we can do that, even though we've kind of been committed to talking about it anyway. She seems to think that we're committed to doing it by this certain amount of time. So, anyway, Mark, with that being said.
Lisa was up first.
Okay, Lisa, this is her second time, but that's okay.
Okay,
Go ahead,
well,
Lisa.
I guess different phase of the same question.
Yeah.
You know, who is actually pushing this? I mean, who is the principal who's involved? Who's presenting this to the town? I haven't seen anyone, so that's a question. And I also think that absent select board approval, I mean, select board, not just a person, absent approval, this has no life. So there seems to be an awful lot of plans being made for something that hasn't actually happened yet. That's just an observation on my part. The process couldn't be more perverted at this point.
Yeah. Mark.
Thanks. I was actually just hoping that you could make that letter that you received today part of the public record, either shared it in.
It's in the public record. It's in our packet.
I
It's
didn't
at
see
the,
it.
yeah, right at the end of our packet.
Is that the
Yeah.
zoning and RLF inputs?
Yeah. Keith posted it when he got it. It was like 1
Yeah,
o'clock in the
it's
afternoon.
there's an issue with downloading it though, because it's a screenshot. I'm not sure what's going on with that, but I
Yeah.
can forward that whole email
Oh.
to every member. I need to fix that up. I mean, I got it at what, 2 o'clock?
I
Something
thought
like that.
Well, thank
I
you for
read
that.
it off the
Really-
website. I read it off the website, I
You
think.
did? And for some reason, it's not coming up on my computer.
Oh.
Hopefully you
have
guys
to
can
open
open
it
it.
up in an email program, I think.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
you know, I would like to have it explained to Josie that she really should not be corresponding with individual members of the boards. If she has a letter that she wants to send, she needs to send it to Keith, and Keith will provide it for us to read. It is not suitable for her to be talking just to individual members of this is a whole board. We, you know, work on that basis. And I consider it ex parte communication if you're talking one-on-one with a developer who wants something from you, or with any applicant who wants something from you. So anyway, that's my feeling. Chris?
I just want to give a little bit more background on the history of this. So about, I think it's like 2 years ago, Josie had a conversation with the folks at VHFA about their programs, or attempted to. I'm still not exactly sure what happened there, but they initiated a conversation that did not culminate in an understanding, at least on Josie's part, of what the programs were. I wasn't aware of that. I presented to this committee about a month ago on options for affordable housing that included the VHFA residential revolving loan program, which seemed like an interesting opportunity to explore. What I didn't know then is that this sort of piqued Josie's memory, and that she went looking herself, found the application, and then came back to the select board with that. I think that I would hope that the way the commission would look at this is that a developer that we are in partnership with, in one way or another, is interested in applying for a state-sponsored program. And to me, the question is, if the town is committing nothing in order to support that developer's application, why wouldn't we do that? And I believe that is the case. The town has committed to nothing, okay, in this letter. And at this point, what I think is appropriate for the Planning Commission is to have a conversation with the select board, and again, not individual select board members, and get the whole story, because I think we're just spinning our wheels otherwise.
Okay, so it looks like Keith has got her letter up. I mean, we can't spend a lot of time on it right now. We don't have the time to spend on it. She thinks that what we're thinking about, my feeling is, if we're going to go to the select board, we need to have something that we have developed over this 7 months of work that we've been doing on this. We need to have a conversation starter. We need to have a place to start, so that we're just not asking them, what do you think about buttermilk? We need a place to start. So our possible proposed small increase in the density looks like it's not enough. And the $500,000 of municipality contribution is not our problem. Looking at the last paragraph of her letter, we have to provide the timeline, a September deadline for final zoning. So please provide a timeline. So that's addressed to us. The density bonus program, she doesn't think much of. That's in the paragraph above. But, we have to start somewhere. So we can go ahead and have our conversation with the select board. We can have our conversation with the public. We can work off the document that I put in the packet for this time before getting this letter. If it's not something that Buttermilk can do, then that's pointless. If it's not something the select board is going to approve, that's pointless. So at least Buttermilk is kicking in with their feelings about what we're thinking about proposing, and we can take that into account or not when we talk to the select board. So that's like the history of what's happened with this developer and with the select board, what they've done and so forth. So we have 5 minutes, and we can talk about this conversation starter I'm calling document that just kind of summarizes where we're at after all this time of discussing this question. There don't seem to be that many issues. There really aren't that many issues. So if we could just look at it for a minute, we could take people's first thoughts on it. We've got 5 minutes to talk about it. Mark, go ahead.
So we are talking about, you want commentary on the letter that was submitted.
No, I want to talk, I want to, if possible, if everybody's willing, I want to get on with the work that we are doing, which is to figure out how we want to change the zoning.
For Jelena Court.
For Jelena Court,
Indifferent of the letter that Josie has submitted to.
indifferent of the letter, because I think people need more time to look at that letter and, you know, and indifferent to the whole process that this came to be. Maybe we need more information about the rental revolving loan fund, what the actual requirements are, what the actual application date is. You know, I think that issue is sort of a separate issue. What I would like to do is get to a point where we have agreed as a commission that these are the issues that we want to talk about, and here are some suggestions that we have.
Okay, all right.
So-
Well, on that note, certainly, I perused the letter while the conversation was going on, and it pretty much answers and supports every position I've
Yeah, I
taken
tried to.
on this
Right.
approach. They're not interested in density bonuses, that kind of thing, and I don't know if we should be exploring it here in result to them. They want,
I'm getting a bill for
but I
something.
would say that
Need it.
in regards to the overall zoning district, I think we do need to consider density bonuses and parking offsets. But to this point, I say we shouldn't even have a conversation on this, so people can read this letter and come back and come to the determination that I made a long time ago regarding their approach to this zoning regs. And we're almost at the point where we could switch gears and talk about the flood hazard overlay district anyway. So I don't know what we can do in 2 minutes to
Okay. All right. So,
ameliorate this issue.
yep. I would just like to, thank you, Mark, just propose that we think about this summary of considered revisions, that we must have come to some conclusions on our own, without Buttermilk, without the select board, over the last 7 or 8 months, for the town's benefit, to have the units of at least 31 units. We pretty much agreed that we want to remove the commercial requirement from the ground floor of all buildings except building 1. Then I think most of us agree that we want to increase the density. And, you know, not everybody, I guess, is going to agree, but that there's room on that property for there to be some more housing if we're truly committed to having more housing. She doesn't think 18 units maybe is enough. The 20 units per acre would give her enough to cover the thin margins that she talks about in her letter. So that would be a place to go. And then the density bonus is something that people have been interested in. And, you know, she's not totally opposed to density bonuses. She doesn't mention the senior housing density bonuses. The workforce, it seemed like she was open to if we made the levels of AMI a little different. Condos, maybe not. True affordable housing, we probably aren't going to want to, well, the true affordable income sensitive housing at 65 to 128 AMI is what Chris suggested the rental revolving loan fund was interested in. So that's why we put that in there. And then offer leased parking, which means that somebody pays Buttermilk for it. And it can either be, for instance, Richmond Community Kitchens could, let's say, lease 5 spaces, or Gabe Furman for his Big Spruce, you know, those downtown buildings you're supposed to make a plan for. So if he leased, for instance, 5 spaces and they got 1 unit for that, that would take those cars off the street and out of the public parking. So it functions as public parking. Or the town could agree to lease some parking. We can't just take their parking away from them.
You
So
could with a density bonus.
taken. Well, and the density bonuses are optional. They have to be optional. The developer can choose to
Well,
do them
they're,
or
they're
can
not
not choose to do
optional.
them.
They're not optional if you already give them everything they want without any density bonuses. They're no longer optional. And it certainly sounds like she has no interest in any of the density bonuses as it's discussed. She just, I'm sorry, give everybody a chance to read the letter and then we can come back to this. But I will say that I think it's time to start hearing from the community.
Yeah, well, you want to hear from the
I'm taking
community.
I'm taking this argument and strongly advocating against giving away the store, because I think that there's a strong contingent of the community that would agree with me if they were to know about what's going on for the past several months. But we're not bringing them into the conversation or giving them a chance to provide us any feedback. And I think that is a mistake that we should correct and bring to the community. If we want to move forward with this, let's find out what some of the opinions are.
Okay, and so you want to bring the community in, Chris wants to bring the select board in. So we need to figure out in what order we're going to do that. And I am not willing to bring either of those groups in until we have something that shows what work we have been doing and what we think works. Taken
Been
all the
running around
evidence
in
into
circles for like
consideration.
6 months on this topic. And the majority of the commission is in favor of just giving higher density and yes, density bonuses too, but increasing it and saying that's it. We already know the position of the planning commission. If we don't know it by now and where we stand for the most part on these things, I don't know what more we need to do. We need
So
to,
if the majority of the planning commission is on that page, then that's what we need to present in our discussions with these other groups. So
with
at
consent
some
and opinion.
point, we're going to take a poll and see if the planning commission is, as you say, on the page of doing this kind of thing. So we don't have time to do that now. We will do that next time. So this is going to have to be the last comment on it. Chris.
I'll wait till next time.
Okay. Yep. I think we're going to, have to have the further discussion, but I'm not going to take it out into the world unless we have some kind of a position. And if it's the position of the, we'll vote on it as the planning commission. And
I'd like to
some
do it
people,
before we vote.
yeah, I know, but I'm
I
not
think
going to
that's
do
the
it
right way to handle this.
until we
This is
have a
big
position.
topic, and you can't just go and finish all of our thoughts before you bring it to the community. You can't do
We're
that.
not
We
going
didn't
to
do that for
finish
any
our
other zoning
thoughts.
district, and yet that's the approach we're taking with this one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mark, I think it's a waste of time to go to the community if we don't go to the select board first. And see, maybe the select board wants to be the ones to go to the community if they consider it to be an important enough issue.
Then
But-
let's not have any more conversation on the topic until we go to the select board.
Agreed.
Presented with where we're at right now. If that's the decision, then fine, let's go to the select board, but let's get it outside of this committee, because this committee is just chasing its tail with arguments.
Yeah, well, we're supposed to be thinking about the issues and taking in the evidence, and that's our
6
job
months. 6
as
months.
the planning commission. Yeah. Okay, so we have to move on. I think we'll take this up again next time and without coming to any conclusions right now. So we'll go on to the last item on our agenda, which is updates and other business. And if I can find the agenda, what is this up here? Okay. So we have a couple of things that we need to be talking about. And one that I'll just mention really quickly before we talk about the flood hazard overlay question. One is that the IC district and PUD was passed by the select board. Our zoning change recommendations was passed, so that's good. 21 days, I think it's the 21st of May, it'll go into effect. So now we really need to take up the other piece of that, which is the subdivision regs and the natural resource standards that relates to the master plan development question. So that's one thing that we really need to do. Secondly, we really need to presumably take up this timeline question for the zoning on Buttermilk. And then the other thing that we need to do, Mark, you can talk about the Volunteers Green charge that was given to us by the select board. Do you want me to talk about it or you want to talk about it?
I'll do it. I'd be happy to. I'm vested in and have a fair deal of background with all my rec committee business and liaisoning with the 3 Parks Committee. But basically what it boils down to is that we are looking to do some sort of development in Volunteers Green to some kind or another, mostly driven by the fact that the current playground structure is at the very, very, very end of its useful existence and needs to be replaced. And the question is how or where how we're going to do that. And one of the things in the special roundtable meeting that was discussed on Monday was installing a playground back where it is, only with much more infrastructure, substructure to maintain the security and the solidity of the playground fixtures. One of the options is to move the playground, either build it there, much more reinforced, or move it up to the knoll area where the bandstand is, and then either take that bandstand, reinstall that, or put in a pavilion with restrooms at the front of the park rather than having everybody go to the back of the park, which that facility there is also continuously flooded and damaged in some way. Basically, what boils down to is the fact that the current flood hazard overlay districts and the current FEMA maps identify the entire park as being in the floodway. That includes the knoll. Our floodway zoning regulations are pretty strict. Our flood plain regulations are pretty strict too, for sure, but the floodway is even more aggressive, extremely limiting, and inadvertently, incorrectly includes the knoll, which really isn't part of the floodway, but certainly is possibly part of the flood plain. Right now, because our zoning includes everything there as a floodway, there's nothing we can do. The floodway is zoning by Richmond standards, not by FEMA standards or state standards, but by Richmond standards, is extremely restrictive. And because of that, we're not able to do anything in the park without all sorts of wrangling and misinterpretation or reinterpretation of the zoning regs, because the floodplain zoning regs aren't very clear to start with. So in order to get the floodplain rezoned, it would be an impossible feat to get the FEMA LOMA, which would change the knoll from floodway to floodplain in time to spend the $500,000 in ARPA funds that are designated for park recreation improvements. That's not really a possibility. It would be it would be a long haul to do the other option, which was proposed in the meeting by the select board, which is for us to rezone the park district and rezone the flood hazard overlay district above the park district to enable a lot more flexibility, which would allow common sense development in the park for the public good, such as being able to put in a bench, which some would currently interpret as not even being able to be allowed at this point. So the zoning, the select board charged the planning commission with investigating, rewriting the zoning bylaws for a park district, and then exploring what those limits are. My personal opinion would be to bring that park district zoning to the levels that are dictated by FEMA and by the newly and increased zoning regulations that the state is putting forward. But if we brought them down to their limits rather than what we have written, that would allow the town, for the public good, to make a lot more changes and flexibility in how that park is managed and the features that can be installed in the park. And that's going to take a little bit of conversation on our part before we can get that going. So I'm hoping that the planning commission will take some time and focus. We got the neighborhood districts off our plate. We're wrestling with Jolena. I'm hoping that we are willing to make some room to discuss the park districts.
Yeah, and one thing that I'd like to add to that is that the forming a park district is not the only option in terms of working with the zoning. So
Good
in
point.
terms of,
We could do some very simple
the
things.
charge from the select board was to work with the zoning and may or may not include making a park district. So, Keith and I have already started to investigate what the actual, what ANRs, so the ANR representative from the towns, from the state to FEMA was there at this meeting. And he has some other ideas about what could be done with the current zoning that exists without making a separate district. So I don't want to go into a lot of detail, but that's not the only option for looking at the zoning, the park district question. There are some other options of things that you could do that would allow you to move things around and put a new playground structure. Pardon me?
To accomplish some of the things that they're talking about, but they still don't even know what they want to do. So
right,
the more
So anyway.
flexibility the planning commission can give the select board and the 3 parks committee to spend this ARPA money, the better off we would be.
Yeah. So we want to come to some conclusions. We don't just want to ask people what they want. We want to come to some kind of a planning, go through a planning process that we understand what the options are and, what's going to be the easiest, maybe what's going to be the least costly, what the pros and cons, what the compromises are. So we will be putting that on our agenda. Except not on the 19th of June, because we're going to have the public hearing on the neighborhoods on that day. So, all right. So that was all I had. And updates, Keith, do you have any other thing that you want to, no other updates or other business? Okay. All right. So that's where we are. And yeah, good job on the neighborhoods. And I think that's good that we have finished that and can move on to some of these other things. So anybody would like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Chris, who is seconding it? Mark?
Yeah.
Okay. Mark seconded it. Is there anyone who is opposed to adjourning this meeting? All right. Hearing no objections, the meeting is adjourned. And we will see you on the, we have a long holiday. See you on the 5th of June. So great. Thanks, everyone.
So then.
Night.
Thank you. Thank you.